Nice to meet you. Are you based here? Okay.
So while everyone is coming back, I'll introduce Alexandra Deschamps-Sonsino. She is an expert in Internet of Things, a designer and an innovator. Some of her work has been exhibited at the MoMA, at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London and the Design Museum in London. And we look forward to hear from her around the Internet of Things.
I like how this is written according to how my passport is kind of the name on my passport, because they fucked up and there's a dash between the two, which now I have to get used to not using. It's very strange. Oh, awesome. So I've posted these slides online in case some of you would like to read them and not listen to me, which does happen sometimes. Thank you for inviting me. This is quite an unusual event for me to attend. I can't remember the last time I said interaction design, HCI, in a willing manner. I tend to speak at quite a lot of tech conferences, people who do tech in a very specific way, which is usually the Internet of Things. You'll find that I am this kind of odd mixture, perhaps, of someone who has a deep history with some people in the room who it's a great pleasure to see because we don't see each other very often. It's even a bigger pleasure to be speaking before one of them. But also have progressed in a really interesting manner where now I spend a lot of my time just writing. I don't do a lot of design work. I studied industrial design, which I think is a field that will eventually die. Yeah, go good. And I also finding myself turning to old tools more and more, and old ways of thinking more and more, which is I'm probably the only person who dragged along 2 books, which I will be referencing in my talk, but I also have in real life, should you want to look at them before committing to an online purchase. It's like a lending library on the go. So I studied industrial design, interaction design. I was the first UK distributor of the Arduino. Who here knows what the Arduino is? That's not bad at all. If you do not, it is a credit card-sized open hardware education platform for electronics. If you've heard of the Raspberry Pi, it was a thing that was there before the Raspberry Pi was there, and helped along that whole ecology of products. And I'm sure that Haiyan's work will illustrate that further. I have no examples of the Arduino in this talk. I do a lot of work with a variety of clients, usually telling them what I think about the Internet of Things within their sector. I'm also the founder of something called the Goodnight Lamp, which I'm also not going to talk about, but is a family of lamps for global friends and family that uses GSM, which is, I don't recommend. Not the Goodnight Lamp, but just as a technology stack to play with. And for the last 7 years, I've been the organizer of the London Internet of Things meetup. You do have a meetup here, which is where I was speaking last night. And I do encourage you to go to the Zurich Internet of Things meetup that is run by my friend Thomas. It's excellent. And they're nice people. They need a bit more attendance from nice people like yourself to have good conversations about what it means in Switzerland to be an IoT. I'm going to start with something I never do, which is sort of quotes from people, famous people who usually end up being white men. But I find these useful because they relate to the things I'm going to talk about. One of which is evolution is apparently intent that man fulfill a much greater destiny than that of being a simple muscle and reflex machine. And I think that presentations that we've heard this morning and the conversations that you must have as an organization relate to this tension where we know that the computer is there to help us become something more. It's just that so much of our society, as I actually built on the idea of us being less and being a reflex muscle machine. The other one is, and they're from the same person, weirdly, in the same book, so it's quite handy, and I have that book here, is the behavior of whole systems, unpredicted by the separately observed behaviors of any of the system's separate parts or any subassembly of the system's parts. This is the definition of Buckminster Fuller for the word synergy, which we don't use on purpose at all. We kind of use in quotation marks as like the word that everybody hates using, but sometimes accidentally uses to mean something completely different. And I find that fascinating because I think that a lot of the conversations that are happening in the world that Sarah's work encapsulates, some of the people who are here from Everyone encapsulates, and some of my work these days encapsulates, is this misunderstanding of the parts and misunderstanding of the influence on the whole. So maybe we should take synergy and revisit it with Buckminster Fuller's sort of approach. And I think these days, I kind of feel like we're prepared for the apocalypse that we sort of planned for. We have this imagery for the last 100 years, and I'm writing a book about smart homes, so let me tell you, I'm basking in images of the future that are very much about things being connected, this kind of hyper connectivity, and ultimately a future that is mathematically coherent somehow. There's always a circle. There's always like a circle around things. There's always circles within circles. There's lines to things. Everything kind of mathematically somehow makes sense. And visually, we feel like, yeah, this is totally it. This is totally the future we want. And I find that that's, of course, a problem because I don't think that it allows us to account for the times when it's not like that, which is almost always. But we feel like we want this future somehow because, you know, a circle is a great shape. It's a great shape to believe in. Triangles are also great shapes. You use them a lot. I don't have a triangle in this presentation. But I find it more interesting to think about futures that are completely incoherent. And this is only a very recent position. This is not the kind of stuff that I have done my whole life. This is just a compound of events and projects that I have spent more and more of my time on that I'd like to share with you. Predominantly something called the Open IoT Mark. I'll talk about what it is, but it is a baby project. It's sort of at its infancy. It's less than a year old. And it is an attempt by a community of people that are less than 100 to look at what it might mean to create a certification mark for IoT. So think of fair trade and the fair trade sticker. 77% of British people know what a fair trade sticker means. It's a very clear, very well publicized sticker. Think of what that might mean in the world of connected products. What does trust mean, ethics mean? How do we do something that is a fair trade sticker for the world of connected products? That's what we're exploring. That's what I'm spending more and more of my time on. And in the things that we're exploring, and this is a very, again, small group of people, mostly technologists, would really appreciate anyone in this room and in the extended Google family to have a look at what we're doing, but we're exploring ideas of trust and risk. This is the more recent, I suppose, it's not technically the more recent of my examples, but it's the more recent in a tangible way, which is the VW emission scandal. A corporation, which I shall not name, which is German and a foundation, provided the sensors to VW to actually measure the emissions. And in the world of engineering, doing that, you have to do in a very particular way. And so someone somewhere sent an email to VW to say, yeah, by the way, just, you know, keep in mind that this could be abused. We're selling you the sensor. It's going to go in all your cars, and you do what you want to do with it, but, you know, just be aware. And by doing that, have absolved themselves of any responsibility publicly. They are not the corporation which is the one that makes the headlines. Because from an engineering perspective, they did the right thing, and they did the commendable thing and the protectable thing in the eyes of the law by sending that one email from that one engineer, which is really interesting. Because that's what trust means and risks means within that area. Who knows where this is? Brownie points if you do. You can yell it out. Christchurch in New Zealand, some years ago, obviously. And I always think of trust and risk in an engineering space as the space where we also are quite happy to bumble along with crappy decision making and crappy structures of living until something happens that makes us go, oh, I guess that we'll build things in an earthquake safe manner now. Because the cost of change is high. The cost of taking every single building in New Zealand and both islands and saying we're going to tear everything down and we're going to rebuild it all to code so that it's earthquake safe is not feasible. So we tend to wait till bad things happen in order to operate any change. And this is because we're people, we're human, we assign a particular cost to immediate decision making and we forget about the cost of later decision making. We're very myopic that way. This is slightly more recent. Brownie points for who knows where this is. Yes, so Florida. Equally here, the same kind of conversation around risk and trust, which is the engineer called 2 days before to say, hey, by the way, we've seen some cracks. You might want to look at this. This might need to be patched. And now this engineer his entire career is being sort of dragged in the dirt because it turns out he was involved in other projects. And oh my God, what does this mean for the other projects? As if that one engineer was the one responsible for an entire project like this, that no one else in the delivery process, the people selling the concrete, the people okaying the launch, whatever it might be, no one else has any responsibility but this one person. So we think about that in terms of big structures. We're kind of happy thinking about those things in terms of the structures that surround us, but we're sort of less comfortable with it, or it's newer to think about it in the things that start to disappear around us, the small devices, the small consumer-facing devices. We don't yet have a really good structures for what we should expect, what risks looks like, what trust looks like. Or something as mundane and as problematic as life cycle. We live in a world where things will not last very long. I am dragging my MacBook Pro until it really literally dies on me, even though I'm now, the nice people next to me were probably thinking, who is this person? Because I'm dragging an external keyboard because the keyboard died. And I'm like, I am not giving up on you if you don't give up on me. Because I refuse to give said corporation that starts with an A a large amount of money yet again every other year. And this baby is like, I bought it in 2013, so I feel like I think we can do another 6 months together, I swear. But life cycle is a problem. It's a problem in everyday devices. It's a problem in cheaper, not even connected devices, but it's even more of a problem in the Internet of Things. And because life cycle has become a problematic concept, so we have something like this, which I own at home because I, yes, drag books along and external keyboards, but I also do try to buy the latest and greatest. And this is an HP Smart Ink printer. It is basically a printer that I used to own and now I rent because I changed the process by which ink is delivered to me. Which means that now this printer, if my credit card or debit card details change, stops printing, because it does not recognize that the online account is linked up to it anymore, and it gives me this really weird message, like the printer can no longer function. It doesn't say why. It doesn't go, hey, maybe you replaced your debit card and the billing kind of process has changed. I can now no longer interact with it until I change my details online. Like, that's a whole new interaction with something that basically makes me want to throw it in the garbage immediately. And it's already a printer, which is already the most frustrating thing ever. Who here names their printers after their pets? Okay, right. 2 people. I think we've got something. I think we can start something. And the life cycle of this is really strange, because now, 5 minutes. Wow, these objects have started having a life of their own somehow. So it's not even the life cycle of how I use it, it's how it decides to be used. We have, of course, more problematic life cycle issues that relate to, in the world of IoT, companies that come and go far more rapidly than most. And I'm kind of being cheeky by picking Revolve, because obviously I'm not an idiot, I know where I am. But there are multiple others in my community that have come and gone in the last 2 years or so. And when a consumer buys something from someone, they don't necessarily think at the back of their mind, I hope this company is successful. I hope this company is successful in 2 years. I hope that this thing keeps working after this company dies. Nobody wants to think that way, because it's sort of constantly thinking in an early adopter kind of way. Not everybody has that kind of money to throw constantly at something. Within this group of people in the IoT Mark, we talk about openness and what open source can mean or not mean, and how could it be used or not used, and who on earth wants to open source everything and still be commercially successful. These are all really difficult questions. But openness might mean that things start to be useful both for us as households and for the city and for researchers in a much broad way. For example, if you were using open data for a particular consumer product, this is a crappy image because they still haven't got a better image on the website, but this is the Air Quality Egg, which is an air quality monitor that you buy for your home, and it gives you your air quality in your home, and you can see the map of all the other air quality eggs. You sort of want that to be connected to, city universities projects or UCL's projects, so that UCL and city don't have to rebuild another air quality monitor to do some air quality monitoring and have to commercially work out their own kind of manufacturing hellhole. And you just want to piggyback on what's there in people's homes. This is a company called Ncube, which is in the UK, which makes a smart hub, but it's a local smart hub for your products. And it's made in an open source way, but it's also made in a way that is super secure. So openness does not preclude security. Obviously, things like Fairphone, which have to do with openness and transparency. And they are 2 different sections in our document, don't worry. Permissions and ownership being another one. I did not want to put Nest here again for obvious reasons. I know where I am. But I bought a Hive at home. I installed a Hive at home. I am not one of the lucky people who actually owns their own properties in the UK. I rent. So I moved. And when I moved, I called British Gas. I said, can I have my Hive with me in the next apartment? No, you can't. So I had to buy another one. I got £50 discount on the next one, but my online account is still tied to the thing that's in the other apartment. And so I had to create another account with another email address to get the app, to create a whole new profile, and the poor bastards in the old flat are stuck with a thing whose entire functionality and the kind of plus of Hive is the fact that I can switch it off with my phone online 20 minutes before I get home. And so I now hold ransom their device somehow. Not, literally. I haven't sent them anything. This is a friend of ours, and some of us in the room know who that is. My friend Russell's wife, Anne. They use a WeThings device, and that gives you a kind of great way of interacting with your weight, and you can chart kind of how you're doing and with your exercise, et cetera, et cetera. Except when your weight and your husband's weight start to get a little too close, and the device says, "Hi, Russell," when it's actually her and not him. Time is up. Wow. Right. So all of these are considerations, and I will skip through these in like 5 seconds. There's some security stuff in the 33 principles that we have published. We have 8 categories which we are using. We are also working in a completely open process, so we do have GitHub things. And we have open tools, which we have literally just produced in the last 24 hours because I gave a talk last night at the meetup. And I would, again, love to get your feedback on all of this. We're not the only people doing stuff around this space. These are 45 of the other things that are happening around the world that touch this space, that are concerned with this space. They are policy papers, they're policy efforts, they are white papers. I mean, we're part of a global movement right now. But I think that we need more responsibility. Top props for who knows what this is? Yes? Yeah. So the iron ring, which if you're Canadian like myself, my brother is an engineer and has this ring. It is a physical reminder of your ethical requirements as a professional. And we have also lots of other frameworks that have been created by people long ago dead who are awesome. Marshall McLuhan's Global Village, which I have, is one of my lending books today, which I really recommend. The other one, which is Neil Postman's 7 Questions for Technology, which I also recommend. They're like decades old, and they're still really useful frameworks for asking ourselves questions. And asking ourselves questions really about what the role of computing is. Really top marks for who knows who said this, and that is my last slide. You'll be happy to know, Florence. What the coming of the computer did just in time was to make it unnecessary to create social inventions to change the system in any way. So in that sense, the computer has acted fundamentally as a conservative force. Is the creator of artificial intelligence himself saying this? I leave you with this. I thank you for your time and your attention, and hope that we can have some conversations after. Thank you.
Do you have a little time for questions? Yeah? Stay there. Anybody? I have one. One of. Oh no. Okay. Aha. Excellent.
No, I'm just perusing the principles, and they look really good. I guess what's the go-to market strategy? I mean, in terms of getting these actually to be used, do you think it works better to sort of legislate? Does it work better through market pressures? Do you think the fair trade label strategy is going to work? But fair trade's premium, that doesn't apply across the board. So in a sense, I would want some of those principles to be used by everyone, not just by the small sort of fair trade subset.
Sure. And the question was about whether this is a premium thing. The certification mark kind of model is the one that we have come to a conclusion about after lots of chats with lots of lawyers, which is always they're always an interesting group of people to talk to about implementability, but also appetite for trusted implementation. So you can tell people what they should be doing, and they can tell you, yes, that they do in a self-certified kind of way. There's nothing to prove that they do, and that's a problem for us. There's other models which we're exploring, one of which is closer to something like the Energy Star rating, which is where you are basically enabling anyone, no matter how bad they are, to be clear about what it is that they are doing. The little that they might be doing, you're championing. So we're definitely in conversations around which implementation of this mark might be the best. Again, if you have thoughts and opinions. We have a very active Slack channel and the usual means. We have open calls every month. We have a newsletter. We have face-to-face meetings. So would love your feedback.
There are no. You had a question.
I'll surrender my question
Heian,
to the
if
floor.
if Heian wants to start to get reading.
So I was curious. I just wanted clarification about the sensor and the VW diesel problem. You seem to be implying that the sensor suppliers had some responsibility in the scandal, but was that really what you meant? And if that's true, how about all the other suppliers?
Oh, sure. But I mean, the sensor is the one that actually is the most active in
Would the
enabling
software
a
be that?
rating. Sorry?
Can the software be that?
Yeah, but without it's a little bit, so the funny thing about software only is that ultimately there is a thing that needs to measure something. So the buck stops with hardware in some IoT applications. Without power to a sensor, you can't measure anything, therefore you got no data and no one owns it. So there is a responsibility that they share. Their way of turning away from that responsibility is this email that the engineers sent out to say, oh, by the way, we're only doing the hardware bit. You guys, we're going to...
My real question is, how do you come to that sort of causal blame analysis? Because gun manufacturers get their materials from steel makers. Do they also adhere into the sort of causal blame responsibility here?
There are liability issues across supply chains, across manufacturers everywhere. And you trust your suppliers to tick certain boxes, whether that's standards boxes. So I'm not going to be supplied with a quality of plastic that might include some lead if I make my toy out of it. There is trust and legal frameworks built into every supply chain. We don't quite have that connection between this hardware and software space. And so a lot of the projects that I showed, the 45 different projects that are around the world, a lot of them now are concentrating on security because they feel like that's an easier box to tick than to look more transversally at ownership, permissions, openness, etc. Because it is about that complex connection. And back to that quote from Buckminster Fuller, which is the movement of each element has unintended consequences at a larger scale. So that's kind of why we're choosing to pick minimum viable everything on lots of different levels, because it's not, I don't think it's future proof to think in this siloed way that, well, you know, my responsibility lies here. No, you're still making a car that pollutes.
Right, thank you.
The next speaker, I'm sure not pronouncing the name correctly, Heian.